Everyone once laughed at Jaguar Wright. They called her crazy, bitter, and said she was reaching. But now with federal files surfacing and millions of documents becoming public, the tone is starting to change. People aren't laughing anymore. This all reignited when names from the Epstein files began resurfacing. Big names, powerful names. For years, Jaguar has claimed that the entertainment industry and the billionaire elite are deeply connected and seriously flawed. Now, some believe her warnings are being validated. One point she keeps emphasizing is the striking similarity between Epstein and Sean Combs, known as Diddy. According to her, people are missing the bigger picture.
In time to talk about Epstein and to talk about Diddy and to not see them as the same situation. Like, there's so many intersections between Epstein and Diddy that we're not even paying attention to. And people who were regulars in the Epstein crew.
Epstein operated through wealth, influence, private planes, and elite circles. Diddy moved through music, fashion, and Hollywood power rooms. Jaguar's argument is simple. Diddy wasn't an isolated figure, but part of a much larger system. And if Epstein was protected for years, the real question is, who else was protected too?
I'm still shocked that there's nothing about Naomi Campbell really coming forward yet. I'm surprised. I'm like bitterly surprised. Her time.
Yeah, they said her name was on the list like the most as far as like flight records.
Yeah.
She was on a lot of flights.
A lot of flights.
You mentioned
also Diddy's ex-girlfriend.
Hey.
Isn't that funny? What a small world.
That doesn't prove anything, but it raises questions. Why are some names exposed while others stay hidden?
When you see there's some people on the list that is no longer with us. David Stern, the NBA commissioner, he's no longer with us. Michael Jackson, his name was on this list.
Odd. That was odd too. Chris Tucker showed up. Like a lot of people showed up. But the funny thing is it's who they're putting up, what they're pushing forward, what they're holding back on. The Sean Carter references, the Jay-Z references are very interesting on so many levels. Because it's being mentioned from different foyers, like from different aspects.
Sometimes names appear due to contact or proximity, but the network is massive, bigger than one person. Elon Musk has been mentioned in broader discussions, while Bill Gates has admitted meeting Epstein in the past.
Bill Gates, there's a draft email in the documents that Epstein was apparently writing to himself back in July of 2013, and in it he addressed Bill Gates, accusing him of recently disregarding their friendship or whatever twisted relationship they had. He also mentioned Gates allegedly asking him to delete some past communications. And when it's past communications with Jeffrey Epstein, the reason why you'd want them to be deleted is easy to speculate about. Here is from the draft email, this section. To add insult to the injury, them implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD, your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your penis. And so sometimes these emails are hard to understand or to follow from Jeffrey Epstein because he wrote like an absolute illiterate madman. I don't know entirely why one of the richest men in the world would need antibiotics to be provided by Jeffrey Epstein.
I do.
Okay, well, they're referencing something there. There was also a draft email that Epstein appeared to be writing on behalf of Gates' longtime science advisor, Boris Nikolic, about his intent to leave the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is from July of 2013. Epstein wrote in his voice, by the way, for this. During the past few weeks, I have been caught up in a severe marital dispute between Melinda and Bill. In my role as his right hand, I have been asked on multiple occasions and in hindsight wrongly acquiesced into participating in things that have ranged from the morally inappropriate to the ethically unsound, and have been repeatedly asked to do other things that get near and potentially over the line into the illegal. From helping Bill to get drugs in order to deal with consequences of with Russian girls, to facilitating his illicit trysts with married women, to being asked to provide Adderall for bridge tournaments, I feel I owe it to my friends and future colleagues to admit a moral failure, to ask forgiveness, and to move on with my life.
This was not an accident. This was not like, oh golly gee, here's a wild guy. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. Oh yeah, he's the pedo that all the powerful people randomly know about and like and constantly go to, and he writes blackmail emails to them. And he brags about how he's constantly helping the Israelis with their spies and their ex-presidents. And we can't put 2 and 2 together? No, I put it together, it's 4. So mainstream media can tell you it's 5 or 0, but they're giant liars. Epstein was clearly part of Israel's operations here, and we're trying to blackmail the most powerful people in the country.
These aren't small figures. They're billionaires and global influencers whose decisions shape entire economies. And that's the point. At that level of power, Jaguar argues, the rules aren't the same. Then there's the biggest mystery of all, Epstein's death. Officially ruled a suicide, but questions remain. Missing surveillance footage, malfunctioning cameras, and guards who reportedly fell asleep. It never fully made sense to the public. Even one former inmate claimed there's no way Epstein should have been able to take his own life under those conditions.
Okay, I'm joined now by someone, and this is interesting, with intimate knowledge of the very jail cell Epstein died in. Michael Francis, he was a capo for the Colombo crime family in the 1980s. He served time in the exact cell where Epstein was later held. Michael, welcome back to the program. Tell us about that cell, and what do you make of these revelations that there is a minute missing from the surveillance video, Michael?
Well, listen, I spent 7 months on that tier and in those cells. And the first thing I have to say, there's no way you are able to commit suicide. There's just no way. There's no way to hang yourself. There's nothing from the ceiling. There's nothing from the bed. You'd have to be a midget and work really hard to try to hang yourself. And I don't think you can accomplish it at that point. As far as the cameras being off, I haven't experienced that. I did 8 years in prison. And I haven't experienced cameras being broken in the perfect storm of correctional officers not walking those cells. They walk in and they look in on you all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's embarrassing to go to the toilet because they're walking past you and looking in the cell constantly. So I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. I can't talk about what happened to him, but I don't believe it was a suicide because you just couldn't physically do it. It would be almost impossible to do it. So that's number one.
It must be interesting, Michael, when you look at the video, though, it must be interesting because you know the area. I mean, we all look at this and it just looks like a prison, but this must look very familiar to you.
Absolutely, very familiar. And the fact that a minute is missing, look, everything around this guy, I just did a very deep dive into him, which I'll be releasing on my platform in the next several days. Look, there's no way that this person operated alone. Look, they have the videos. Alan Dershowitz recently said that he saw the client list, but because there's people that he can't, because he's an attorney, he can't, reveal what he saw. But he said he saw the client list. He's demanding that it be released. To think that there's no flight logs, that there's no client list, that the thousands of recordings that they had, because I found out for sure that he had cameras on every bedroom, recording everything, and all of a sudden, all of it is gone. I mean, none of this makes sense.
Was it suicide or something else? Is the full truth even public? Right now, no one seems to have clear answers, and that uncertainty is exactly what fuels growing suspicion. If Epstein was silenced to prevent further exposure, then what does that mean for everyone connected to him? Could something like that happen again? Jaguar Wright doesn't claim to have proof of everything, but she points to patterns, protection, delays, and information being held back for years, while powerful figures continue as if nothing happened. For a long time, people dismissed her, laughed at her, ignored her. But now things are starting to shift. Federal investigations are ongoing, documents are being released, and public pressure is rising. Suddenly, people are looking back at what she said in a different way. Maybe she wasn't shouting into the void. Maybe she was just early. If the full scope of these connections is ever exposed, if Epstein wasn't acting alone and others were operating within similar powerful networks, then this story could go far beyond what anyone expected. It wouldn't be about one man, it could involve some of the most influential names across industries. Recently, figures like Lex Wexner have faced renewed scrutiny, with congressional committees calling for questioning and deeper investigation. This shows the story isn't fading, it's evolving. At the same time, pressure around these investigations is increasing. Legal teams are pushing back, tensions are rising, and the stakes are becoming clearer. When you're dealing with this level of influence, money, and global reach, every move matters and every revelation carries weight. What we're seeing now might only be the beginning, because as more documents surface and more connections are examined, the public is realizing this was never just about one individual. It may have always been about a much larger system. And the real question is, how deep does it go?
Les Wexner, one of the closest known benefactors of Jeffrey Epstein, says he was, quote, naive, foolish, and gullible for trusting the late convicted offender. The 88-year-old testified before members of the House Oversight Committee in a closed-door deposition yesterday. He previously led the former parent company of Victoria's Secret and hired Epstein to manage his money in the mid-1980s. In his prepared opening statement, Wexner said he cut ties with Epstein shortly after his arrest in late 2006, but the latest release of Epstein files show the two stayed in touch past then. In her book, Selling Sexy, Victoria's Secret and the Unraveling of an American Icon, CBS News contributor and Puck fashion correspondent Lauren Sherman discusses Wexner's years-long relationship with Epstein, and Lauren joins us now. So tell us more about their relationship.
So Epstein was advising Wexner since the early 80s. He was introduced to him by the guys at Bear Stearns. He was vetted by him. He was a casual advisor. And then by the early 1990s, Wexner actually granted him power of attorney, which we all know is a very rare thing to do with a financial advisor. And he had that until 2007 when all these accusations and Epstein started to get into really big trouble. Wexner has tried to remove himself from the Epstein narrative, but the reality is he made Epstein very rich. And so the two men have been intertwined and have affected Wexner's legacy as an entrepreneur and a person who really built a lot of Ohio over the last 40 years.
An inventory. Then there was I hired a lady to be like the house manager who had run the U.S. Embassy in Rome, and she said, yeah, I know how to do this. And I said, well, why don't we keep inventories of stuff? And she said, well, yeah, I could do that. So she did that as kind of a puny example, but I wouldn't have had the idea. But then all the things were inventoried. That wasn't work for me or Jeffrey. It was just regularly done.
Answer the question. 5 words, okay? Answer the question.
Okay.
One of the most interesting parts of this story is that the alleged cover-ups around Epstein and Diddy don't seem like sudden reactions. It feels more calculated, like something planned over time. In July 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice removed federal prosecutor Maureen Comey, who had worked on cases involving Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Diddy. There was no clear explanation. She was simply gone.
Maureen Comey, the daughter of the ex-FBI director James Comey, has been fired from the U.S. Attorney's Office there in the Southern District of New York. Remember, she just worked on the Diddy trial. She also has worked on the Epstein case. The Associated Press has it as follows, that the DOJ has fired Maureen Comey. Now, she is the daughter, like I said, of James Comey. She was a prosecutor in the federal cases against Sean Diddy Combs and Jeffrey Epstein. That's according to two people familiar with the matter telling the AP that today. There was no specific reason, though, given for her firing from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. Now, her termination comes shortly after she prosecuted Combs, who was acquitted of trafficking and racketeering charges. The rapper was convicted of those lesser related offenses. Remember, he'll be sentenced in October. Now, the DOJ recently appeared to acknowledge the existence of an investigation into James Comey, though the basis for that inquiry is unclear. Remember, he was abruptly fired by President Trump in Trump's first term in 2017. So, this might be news to you. Maybe you don't even know. James Comey has a daughter who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York on very high-profile cases, like the Sean Diddy Combs case, like the Epstein saga.
And after her firing, she reportedly shared a chilling message with former colleagues, calling fear a tool used to silence independent thought. That idea is now being echoed across political circles, as many believe a larger cover-up may be unfolding in plain sight.
Newly released documents tonight say President Trump personally warned officials about Jeffrey Epstein decades ago. An FBI interview summary describing how President Trump called the then Palm Beach police chief to tell him, "Thank goodness you're stopping Jeffrey Epstein. Everyone has known he's been doing this." Adding people in New York knew Epstein was disgusting.
He kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club because Jeffrey Epstein was a creep, and that remains true. And this call, if it did happen, corroborates exactly what President Trump has said from the beginning.
But President Trump said this in 2019.
No, I had no idea. I had no idea.
The former Palm Beach police chief, Michael Ryder, not commenting to NBC News, but telling the Miami Herald the interview with Donald Trump happened in the summer of 2006. According to the document, the president told Ryder he was around Epstein once when teenagers were present, and Mr. Trump said he got the hell out of there, and added about Epstein's convicted co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, she is evil and to focus on her.
A prosecutor connected to Epstein, Maxwell, and Diddy is suddenly removed with no public explanation, right as political pressure around the Epstein files is reaching a boiling point. At the same time, reports began surfacing from outlets like TMZ claiming that sources inside the White House were discussing the possibility of a presidential pardon for Diddy, raising serious questions. Think about that. Diddy had already been convicted on federal charges under the Mann Act for transporting individuals across state lines for illegal purposes. That alone was major news, yet insiders suggested there were conversations happening at high levels about potentially erasing it. Then Donald Trump addressed the situation publicly, saying he once got along with Diddy and even thought he was a good person, but added that Diddy had been hostile toward him during the campaign, which made the idea of a pardon more complicated. Now, figures like Dr. Umar are weighing in, offering their own theories about how the situation could unfold.
With regard to Donald Trump's refusal to pardon Sean Puffy Combs or to commute the sentence of Sean Puffy Combs, because he don't have to pardon him, Art. He could just commute the sentence and say he served enough time, let him go home. You know, he's not doing that either. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's not necessarily due to the fact that he got an issue with Diddy. And we know Donald Trump is a racist. He's a bigot. He can't stand black people. We know that. He has a whole history of racism. His father was a racist. His grandfather, Frederick Trump, who immigrated to America from Germany, because Trump is a second generation American. Okay, if you don't count the first generation, the arriving generation. But his grandfather, who immigrated here, Frederick Trump, he couldn't stand black folks. He couldn't stand black folks. In fact, Donald Trump's father, I think, Art, either the father or the grandfather, but I think it's the father, Fred Trump, he was even allegedly, he has been accused of being sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan. And we know for a fact that Donald Trump's father and possibly even grandfather, they were well known in New York for practicing residential discrimination against black people. And so was Donald Trump. So the grandfather, father, and Trump, all German. Donald Trump is a German, by descent. They were all known to not like black people and discriminate against them in the leasing and purchasing of their real estate in New York. So you're talking about a white supremacist here.
Then there's Ghislaine Maxwell. Her brother recently spoke out, claiming she's being used as a scapegoat for the crimes of powerful, high-profile figures.
Substantial claims that Ghislaine has put forward as to why she did not receive a fair trial. Now, the upshot of that petition will be one of three. It's denied. That's a shutout. An evidentiary hearing is ordered. The release of the Epstein files, which everyone has jumped on, with some famous people having been cut down, as it were, whether it's Mandelson or Prince or whatever, the former Prince or whatever. But within the millions of pages that have been released are some exceptionally important documents from Ghislaine's perspective, which entirely support her contention that she did not receive a fair trial. This isn't just us or Ghislaine trying to get sympathy. Obviously, she's convinced of her own innocence. And the issues that have come to light, be they the matter of the lying juror or the deliberate hiding of exculpatory information and evidence by the government, by the prosecutors. It is my view that Epstein was guilty. It is also my view that my sister is not guilty. That's to say, innocent of the charges that she was convicted of.
Right. I mean, okay, so there are other people have been accused of things, and they have not necessarily been accused of the crime of which your sister has been accused, but people have asked questions about their association with this man, who they knew to be a convicted. So I cannot relitigate Ghislaine's trial because I don't have the knowledge and the information to do it. You can probably very easily shoot down every point I might raise. It's almost pointless trying to do it. But what I can say is she was for a very long time perhaps the closest friend and confidant to a convicted pedophile who trafficked. Is that in and of itself not something that greatly troubles you about your sister?
Look, she was in a relationship with a physical relationship, as far as we know, with Epstein from roughly 1992 to about 97, 8, something in the later 90s. And the relationship then, that aspect of the relationship then changed, and it became a very much more professional relationship where, in fact, she had substantial responsibilities for running, building, renovating, overseeing, and managing many substantial properties that he owned.
Some legal experts, including Epstein's former attorney, Alan Dershowitz, argued Maxwell should get immunity to testify before Congress. She knows the travel arrangements, who flew where, and potentially everything. If she speaks freely, she could expose powerful people. If she cuts a deal, she might protect them. But would the public trust a transactional deal? It's unlikely. The intrigue deepens with Diddy, accused of gathering blackmail material on influential figures. Many wondered why Trump didn't pardon him. Judge Joe Brown suggests it was strategic. Diddy's case hasn't fully run its course, and pardoning too early could stop bigger revelations.
If you pardon him, you may cut yourself off from finding out what else is going on. Like when Diddy first started coming under suspicion, I said, you know what? This sounds like somebody is upset because in 15 years of recordings with all of these freak parties going on, somebody is there that doesn't want that fact to come out or that allegation to come out, so somebody's being protected. So who's being protected, and what are we criminal law to prosecute somebody, persecute them so they can't say anything about somebody? That's why we have the Bill of Rights, so that doesn't happen. But it's completely flaunting the Bill of Rights, this so-called lawfare. So is that what's really behind this whole thing? So Diddy kind of put himself right in the midst of, there were some reprehensible characteristics of what he was doing. And it's not nice. The whole thing about being into what looked like pimping, I'll say that as an allegation, is not clean. So, law has this thing of if you want relief, make sure your hands are clean. So his hands aren't exactly clean of some of the things, even if the consequences are a little bit wrong in terms of what is trying to be accomplished. You don't go out and persecute somebody to protect somebody's reputation. And 15 years worth of recordings will have deterred a lot of people in the entertainment and communications industries who might have otherwise done some foul things to somebody, but they held back because they knew that somebody had damning evidence on them. So who else did you hear about at these large, several times a week freak parties? You see, you didn't hear too many names, did you?
What do you think is really happening behind the scenes? Share your thoughts in the comments below.